Hello and welcome to episode 196 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're probably going to get into a little bit of Black Ops 7, certainly some of the competitive aspects around BO7 after its release. We also, I don't know, we might get into the campaign a little bit. We were talking about it before the stream went live. So we might talk about that, and we also have a bunch of ROSTERMANIA stuff that we need to kind of clean up, and we're pretty much done. I think we're almost, or if not, very very close to being fully confirmed going into the 2025 season, which begins 2 weeks from tomorrow, from when we're recording this. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, basically got a ton of confirmations now since the launch of Black Ops 7, which feels weird. Uh, Even if you did the New Zealand trick or whatever, game's been roughly out a week or just under a week. Um, it feels like it's been a lot longer to me. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but um, the game even technically hasn't been out for a full week yet, but we did get a lot of roster confirmations. There is one team that still hasn't been confirmed, and if I had to put money on it based on how the offseason shook out and everything like that, this would not have been my pick for the last team to be announced, but we'll get into all that. And yeah, like you said, we've had a couple online tournaments already that have been interesting in terms of like the formula that we've talked about previously, where not full teams participating, but we got an interesting one coming up this weekend where full teams for the CDL will be playing for the first time. And I know you had a funny reaction when we texted about that and whatnot. So yeah, we got plenty to talk about. Should be a good one.
I think we should just start with Black Ops 7 because that's really the biggest news or most pressing news to most of the people that are probably listening or watching this. Obviously, like you said, BO7 came out. People have been playing it for the last week or so. I really haven't seen a ton of, I guess, more specific feedback. I think generally, just whenever a video game is released, you're always going to get people that say like this is the greatest thing that ever has graced God's green earth, and then there are the other people that say these developers should be kind of punished for their crimes against humanity. I tend to fall somewhere in between. Maybe they should go to prison. Maybe they don't need to be like killed or anything. But from what I've seen, it's obviously skill-based matchmaking was a huge part of the conversation before launch, months before launch. And really, I haven't seen a ton about it since then, other than people complaining that they didn't get rid of skill-based matchmaking, and then other people who are basically in their comments saying you're telling on yourself. That just means that you're not good, and you're just getting dominated by people that might be about the same level of you. I want to get your kind of feedback. Obviously, you said before we went on there that you haven't played too much of the actual matchmaking, the actual multiplayer. You've mostly been on zombies, but just in general, what have you kind of been feeling playing Black Ops 7 and seeing around the community on Twitter specifically?
Yeah, I haven't seen too much, kind of like you alluded to earlier. The main complaints, ironically, that I've seen from the casual perspective has been around the campaign, which is kind of funny because, like we were talking about before we went live, I don't know the last time either of us actually sat down and like I'm gonna go play a COD campaign. But um, from a competitive perspective, the bigger issue seems to be weapon balancing and GAs, which has always been a hot topic in the competitive atmosphere. So that's a little different, but in terms of like public matchmaking and that stuff, I really haven't run into anything too obscure. You know, it's kind of just funny to joke about it. Like if you're playing a pub or whatever and you stomp on the other team, and then the next game you get stomped, you're kind of like, oh, that's the SBMM kicking in, but it's mostly just saying that to joke. Um, the one thing I will say is, I don't know if it's been my just because I've only played a couple hours of multiplayer, but um, with the persistent lobbies now and not the lobbies resetting after every game, you're playing with a lot of the same kids in multiple games. Like people aren't leaving and you're playing in them, and then you can make. It was like last night was playing S&D pubs with Trem and my cousin, and we had a guy on our team. His name was like Warzone, and then a bunch. It was like 5516 or something like that. Warzone 5516, and dude couldn't shoot straight. Was an absolute bot, and we won that game, and then we stay in the lobby now because the lobbies don't disband, and whatever the next map was going to be, we see like it splits into the two teams. We had Warzone 5516 or whatever his name was on our team again, and we're like, yeah, we're backing out, we're not playing with this guy again. So that's the bigger thing I've experienced personally in terms of the matchmaking. It's kind of just been little funny stuff like that, like nothing too crazy. I feel like I haven't like had super sweaty lobbies yet or anything to that extent, and it could again be more about me not having invested a ton of time in multiplayer at this point. But uh, yeah, like I was telling you, I've really enjoyed Zombies so far. That's been I think they absolutely hit it out of the park with this. I'm not even gonna call it a transit remake, but it definitely like it's like if they were gonna try and do a remake of Transit and without it being actually super close to being like Transit, like that's the best way I can try to describe it. It's not Transit, but it's kind of like if Transit had a baby, and it's not a junior, but it's still the baby of Transit. Um, so I've really loved the Zombies experience. Multiplayer's been whatever, and haven't played the campaign, but definitely have seen the people commenting on it and whatnot, and that is what it is.
Yeah, and I think you sent me that tweet about the Monster Launch Invitation Tournament, and
Yes.
my first response, I literally texted you back immediately because I saw it, and I was like, "Where's our royalties?" Because
Yeah.
that's kind of what we've been asking for. But that's honestly something, and obviously we've seen it. Methods hosted a tournament. We'll talk about it. The Flank also hosted a tournament this past weekend. But like I did feel like a pretty good sense that the community is kind of taking advantage of like what's been happening over the last week. I don't see too many pros, and maybe I've muted them, which is very possible because some of them are very very annoying. But I haven't seen too many pros just being absolutely uh, off their rocker, just like hating this game and saying like, "What the hell are the devs doing?" Which I think is a good thing. I'm sure there are pros that think that maybe they're just not tweeting it. Maybe they're I don't know if the fine system is still in place, but it seemed to be working for a little bit. Octane not included, but I think these tournaments are really good, and I want to talk about them real quick because
Yeah.
so the 17th Methods host a $10,000 tournament, a 4v4 tournament. And then the Flank, obviously Zuma, he hosts a tournament the next day, $20,000 tournament. And then this coming weekend, the 22nd and the 23rd, there's the Monster Launch Invitation. And that was actually tweeted out by the Call of Duty League Twitter account, which I thought was like, okay, like what are we like there's something here. Obviously Monster is a sponsor of the CDL, and we're getting like these actual CDL teams involved in these tournaments. So it's a 16 team double elimination bracket where it's Optic, it's Stallions, the Royal Ravens, G2 Minnesota, FaZe Falcons, Koi, War, Team War, Challengers team, LA Thieves, Bush, Heretics, Orglis, Breach, the Boston Breach, Cloud9, New York, the Vancouver Surge, and Omit Brooklyn. That's kind of what we've been talking about is like you need the challengers teams to kind of be involved. And this feels so much more, even though it's only 4 teams, really. Like it's only those 4 extra teams. It's only a few of those non CDL teams. But like that just, it brings the community, in my opinion, a lot closer together. What did you think when you obviously sent this to me? So you saw it before me. But what did you think of this kind of idea and the fact that they're actually doing it?
Yeah, I think that's really your reaction. Although you were kind of joking about it, it was kind of um, it was just this is basically what we've been talking about, and it's not, I know what I have said is that they should have a tournament like this literally the weekend that COD launches, because there's not
Yeah.
as much of the midnight releases and everything like that. Even if people do the New Zealand trick, which seemed to be like just I'm not gonna just brush that under the rug. This year it just seemed like everybody was doing it, and then just nobody gave a shit. It was like people were tweeting like, "Oh, I'm gonna fly to New Zealand," and it's like, and then there
Yeah.
were other people who were just like, "No, I'm just gonna go play COD," and I did this time zone thing to just be able to get early access to the game. So I thought people were a little more vocal about doing that as opposed to in past years, but it is what it is. Even if they did that, we were saying like you do a tournament on the weekend after the game releases, people only have the game for 24, 48 hours, and then you're playing in a tournament. They're all on the same playing field. I guess to an extent, this is the same thing. It's just instead of that 24 hours of having the game, everybody's had the game for a week now, and you're still kind of feeding off the launch of the game, because like it's only a week. So that's what I definitely am a big fan of in terms of them doing this so close to the launch of the game. It's a good way to hype it up. Um, and it's also interesting that it's with these full teams, because like you mentioned the method switcheroo tournament and the flank tournament the last 2 days. For whatever reason, CDL is still not allowing uh, preseason tournaments with full CDL rosters, so they have to do like the two, I think, methods tournament was random duos, and then I think Zuma's did like AR duos with SMG duos from other teams, and vice versa. One of them it was like, because I know it was methods, because methods had Pred and Celium playing together, so obviously that's a sub and an AR. Whereas Zuma was doing the two ARs from one team and two SMGs from another team playing together. So this tournament is gonna have some of those challengers teams in it, and it's full squads, so it's really the first full taste of the 12 CDL teams, even though one of them hasn't been officially announced yet. And then for the supposed top challengers teams, which again, that's interesting because we all know with challengers how things change
Yeah.
um, throughout the season. But this is a good opportunity for those 16 guys to at least showcase their abilities. And there's a chance some of these challengers teams get double first rounded here in this tournament, and then they make a change. But there's a chance for some of the challengers players to put on a show and uh, potentially make a little bit of a run that helps set them up for success throughout the rest of the season. So I'm excited for this tournament. I think it's really cool that we're getting this so close to launch, and with full CDL squads. And yeah,
The one team that you said that hasn't officially announced, like they're called Orgless. It's LAG. They're the only team that's not on this bracket. Um, I mean, Ghosty's in the comments, saying WCDL, W Activision. I don't know, like it feels like they're just going to announce Genomates like on the day that they had their first match, as is tradition with literally every Call of Duty League organization for whatever reason that they think there's no reason to hype it up beforehand. It's just, oh yeah, we have a match at 3 o'clock today at 2:45. We are a new team. These are our new jerseys. This is our roster. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It does feel like it's going to be the case. Hopefully, by the time that we have this tournament this weekend, they announce the team name. I think that would be really, really stupid.
the only thing I can think of is there were early reports early in the off season about potential relocation slash rebrands for this Gentlemate squad, whether it would be like LA Gentlemates or Paris Gentlemates or something like that, removing the LAG branding. I feel like we haven't heard anything about that in a while, though. And
Yeah.
in previous years, we've heard about issues. It was even this year with the Carolina Royal Ravens. Like there was potential, like space station reports of space station allegedly trying to acquire the org and rebrand and whatnot, and that fell through. And we know there are strict timelines for when stuff has to be submitted. So that's why I feel like that's not the case here, where it's like the branding is just going to stick and they're just waiting for whatever reason. But based on how, if you guys listening have been listening to all of our off-season shows, like the Gentlemates roster was one of the first, not first dominoes, but it was one of the very early
Yeah.
rosters that was reportedly set in stone. And a lot of the other ones that have been confirmed over the last week were some of those final teams that like were waiting for some of the big players to, land in their destinations and whatnot. So that's what's really surprising to me is that this team that's seemingly been set for multiple months. I mean,
Yeah,
where is the
it's
last?
August 13th was
Yeah,
Ronnie Intel's tweet. So it's been over 3 months now.
yeah. So don't know what the whole deal behind that has been, but regardless, I mean, we think the roster is Envoy, Ghosty, Neptune, and Sib based on the pairings we saw in these last two tournaments with the teams. That seems to be the case. Sib was actually frying. I was watching Sib play, and one of the tournaments he was playing with Scrap and Hydra, which that brings me back full circle here to what you were saying before we got into this tournament. You were saying you haven't seen a ton of people uh, talking on Twitter and whatnot. That just you haven't been keeping an eye on Scrappy Doo because he's been going a little rogue. A lot of his streams, he's been pretty vocal about the one AR that's dominant right now and the GAs and the attachments or whatever. And I saw a pretty big thread the other day with getting some comments from what he's looking for in the weapon balancing and whatnot. But other than him, I do agree with you. I feel like in previous years, we've seen a lot more vocal pros in more of the pros being a lot more vocal than this year.
Yeah, I honestly might have Scrappy muted on Twitter because he's a little too wild for me at different points. What I was thinking about this, and I really love that none of these three tournaments kind of stepped on each other's toes. Like they were not, because obviously that happens, and that's kind of like a tradition, or at least it used to be, where there'd be like GB tournaments, there'd be UMG tournaments, there'd be whatever, like COD agent tournaments, all these different little orgs that are doing these midnight release tournaments, and
Yeah.
there'd be tourney sharking, which is it's really fun when you're watching a stream, but then when you're like watching another stream and you're waiting for that team to play another team and they're tourney sharking, it wasn't that great. I think though that next year, obviously, if this is going to be something that happens every year, and I hope so, I would like to see one of these tournaments on Thursday night. I know the game doesn't technically release until Friday or whatever, but like let's just be real. Like people are playing the game on Thursday night. I would love to see one of the tournaments, methods, for example, where maybe limited, like there can be no teammates on the same team for this tournament. It's a 4v4 tournament, but we have basically all the CDL players, but none of them are teammates. That's the first tournament. Say it's $10,000 like it is here. On Friday night, you'd have something like the flank tournament where you could have two teammates. You could have a pair of teammates with each other, and it's a $20,000 tournament. And then on Saturday night, you have the CDL's kind of official launch online tournament, something like they're doing here, where you actually have full teams and you're able to play with challengers teams as well. Maybe even bring it into like a 24 team tournament, maybe if you want to do something like that. But either way, then you have like a full weekend of these tournaments, and maybe have like a Sunday like matinee or whatever tournament. Maybe something quick, something maybe is not as serious, because Sundays are a little weird, especially during the fall with football and everything. So maybe that won't work out as well. But I think there's a lot of potential there. I think that there's a ton of excitement that you can generate around these game releases, and as a result, the competitive side, which is such we've talked about it ad nauseum. Probably the people probably listening are like, shut the fuck up about this shit, but it really is important that this is the most important time for Call of Duty in general, and that therefore it is the most important time for competitive Call of Duty, and we never really get a lot of capitalization off of that. And hopefully this is kind of the beginning of something promising. And then, obviously we get the actual start of the CDL season in 2 weeks. So we'll see if it translates, if it has any effect. Granted, the numbers are definitely going to be bigger in terms of viewership this year because it's back on Twitch. There will be co-streams, all that kind of stuff. So it will look good, and hopefully that will make Activision or whoever kind of believe that this is the reason that there are so many people watching the CDL in November or December 2025 than they were in December 2024. Hopefully they just kind of get fooled in that regard. As far as these tournaments though, so the first one was Methods, obviously. Snoopy, our boy, Cammy, Cell, and Pred win that tournament. A really weird team, obviously. You got two Boston Breach guys, basically the goats, and then two plebs, Cell and Preb, with Vegas. They win the first tournament, and then the second one, Dashy, Mercules, Joe Deceives, Real, which is like a god squad, like one of the most talented teams I've ever seen put in a video game, and they won that tournament. Anything jump out to you with these tournaments or just the teams in general? Just the fact that Snoopy and Celium were on the same team just seems very, very odd to kind of conceptualize.
Yeah, well, they did the teams like it's at least Zuma did, but I'm pretty sure Methods did the same thing as well. They just like spin a wheel,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's all random for how the duos are paired together. But I know Snoopy had a pretty solid 1v3 on a raid against Scrap Squad in that Hydra in that Methods tournament that I sent you. So that was pretty cool, especially because you probably consider Snoop was maybe like 10 years old when Raid was first released, and possibly even younger. And even in Cold War, he was probably like 15, 14.
He was definitely
Um,
younger when Raid was first released, yeah.
yeah. So um, that was pretty funny to think about. And for this other one, it was an optic. Both optic duos made it to the finals of the flank tournament on different teams, and I thought everyone was calling the Shotzi and Hook duo were playing with Slasher and Nero, and they were calling that Team Slasher, and I just thought that was funny for my purposes. Instead of it being like optic versus optic, it was like Team Dashy or Team Mercules versus Team Slasher, and I thought that was funny. There was also a clip I saw unrelated to these tournaments, but I think it was like launch night. Slasher had a round 11 1v4 against the Stallions, Zuma's challengers team, in one of the S&D tournaments. And that got me pretty fired up, So for all the people out there who might be saying Slasher's done and dusted, I know it's just an online tournament, but he's always been good at S&D, and he's showing off early on in this game that he still got what it takes to hang with the big boys. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, overall with these tournaments, I'd say the one thing we'll talk about it a little more when we get into these rosters, but the biggest thing for me so far with my early viewing of competitive has been the one gun that's dominating the meta is the M15, which is the first AR that's being used, and there have been a lot of cases where it's just been 8 M15s on the map. There have been talks of GAing, allowing people to not use a red dot on it because it was
Mm-hmm.
basically just becoming a do-it-all weapon if you're just using the iron sights, and it was frying more than any of the SMGs. So there were 6 to 8 M15s on the map at points. They were talking. Scrap was losing his mind in one stream I was watching of one of the tournaments over like one of the teams using a muzzle, and he was like, "We can't be using the muzzle." Um, so they're trying to figure out the weapon balancing on that front. I think it was yesterday, they were trying to just fully GA the M15 and try out one of the other ARs. I think it's the Mirage. It was one of the last ARs. I can't remember the name. It starts with a D. It's like D20 Mirage or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, DS20 Mirage. Is what they were trying yesterday, and I've liked that gun in zombies. I can't I can't speak to how good it is in multiplayer because I only used it for one game of zombies. But um, so I think that's just the bigger issue. And I know I just saw Treyarch tweeted a dev video 20 minutes ago. So literally as we started going over some of their plans for their first post-launch update or whatever, in terms of weapon balancing or whatever. I saw Octane tweeted in response to the dev video saying they might be looking at buffing some of the SMGs instead of nerfing the ARs, which that could be interesting because then we're just
Fan
gonna
of
have
that.
multiple guns frying, and might just be a lot of kills, which could be fun to watch. But could just lead to even more overpowered guns existing, because the Dravik is pretty solid. If a sub was being used, um, that's the Dravik is the sub that I've seen. I know I don't even know what I was just gonna say there. Simp had um, a game. I think it was against Scrap and Hydra again. I can't remember which tournament, but he dropped 18 in S&D, and he when I was watching him, he was using the Dravik. So it hasn't always been early on like 8 M15s, but it's been like 6 to 8 in a lot of these games I've been seeing, and then like one person on each team at most using some other different type of gun. And I don't consider that a healthy meta, especially when you're already, like I said, game's not even out a week and we're already talking about trying to GA the way you use a gun. Like just saying like you have to use a red dot on this gun because if you just use iron sights it's so OP. Like that's like classic COD GA stuff in my head, and like trying to explain that to somebody else who isn't following the scene, like they would just I don't even know how someone would react to that. So um yeah, that's early on. That's my initial concern is what we're gonna do. I think it's pretty obvious that the meta is going to look different once actual CDL play starts, whether it's in the form of the M15 being completely GA'd or maybe it gets nerfed to the point where it's usable in some capacity. Um, I guess I'll wrap up my little rant here by saying M8 nowhere to be seen because it is technically a marksman rifle, and we all know those marksman rifles are just auto GA'd right off the bat. There is a burst gun, the X9 Maverick. It's called the Maverick. It's X something Maverick. It made me think of the burst gun from Black Ops 3. That wasn't the M8, the X14 or something like that in Black Ops 3. I
Yeah,
can't remember what it
sounds
was, but
sounds right.
but that's what Trem told me last night, that was like also instantly banned from the rule set, and I was kind of upset about that. But like that was a burst gun that I could have saw, like if it wasn't deemed to be super OP at first, maybe that could have snuck its way into the meta instead of the M8 because the M8's a marksman rifle. But yeah, I think right now we're just gonna have to see what happens with this M15, and then the meta will probably solve itself from there.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I think I don't know, like this is just how it goes with COD in general nowadays, where you get really there are like two or three good guns off launch, and then the pros, whatever the best one is, that one is most at risk of being GA'd because the pros are like, all right, like enough of this. I think I don't know, like I get it. I get it from their point of view, but we've talked about it before. It should not be fully in their control uh, how they can GA these things, or to what extent. But yeah, I again I do understand their kind of complaint is like this is ridiculous, and this can be really hard to play against. And I saw on Arcity's clip, I don't know if you saw that, and he, I don't even know who he was playing against, but he was playing S&D on raid, and he kills a guy, or yeah, he kills a guy, and he basically gets like insta traded, and then he watches the kill cam, and the other guy has, I believe, the M15, and he was throwing a stun at the time, so he hit fired the whole thing, and he pretty much connected on every single bullet of his hit fire. Arcees looked like he was about to vomit on stream. How gross that was. That's something that probably can't happen. That's like we should fix that, because if that happens like in a round 11 S&D, people are going to lose their minds, and rightfully so. But it all goes back to the devs. Like I do like that they're kind of instantly reacting to this first week of like information that they're basically getting. But this kind of needs to be constant, because when they go a long stretch without weapons tuning, or specifically tuning the weapons that really, really need it in competitive, it just turns into a GA fest. And if the M15, for example, gets GA'd, we're never going to see that gun ever again. Like, we're going to completely forget about it by the time that the CDL actually starts, because people are like, yeah, we're not using that gun and we're not testing it. when it actually gets nerfed or whatever. I right now it looks like because of the M15, the meta definitely favors like AR heavy rosters,
Yep.
which we talked about it this offseason. Not a ton of ARs just floating around in general. So, I think a team, I mean, honestly, a team like Optic, just in general, with how much talent they have, I think LAG, it would also be a pretty good team just in general with guys like Ghosty and Sib that could both run ARs. I'm trying to look through the actual rosters. It's probably just going to come down to the same group of teams in the end because that's kind of how it goes. But, I mean, LA Thieves going to be interesting because if Kenny's really good with this AR, they could be really good just in general because but if they're if it's a sub meta, I don't know if that's going to work in their favor just because of Kenny in general. But I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. But yeah, I think this
No,
this meta, it could be pretty interesting early on, at least in the CDL season.
yeah, that's I was because I was thinking about it from a similar perspective in turn. I was thinking about it for Toronto just because we've talked about Kleenex going to the flex
Yeah.
and how the meta would impact a team like Toronto. Whereas if it's a 3 SMG meta, having Joe Deceives, Real, and Kleenex all being able to use SMGs is just absolutely terrifying to think about. But the opposite here, you're having 3 really good SMG players potentially all on ARs, and the counterpoint to that is that at this point the M15 is really just a do-it-all weapon. And
Yeah.
you talking about Arcides, I put it in the notes just in case you didn't see it. There's a clip in the flank tournament where Shotzi took someone hostage and literally hit fired someone across the map because I don't think you can aim down sights when
No,
you
you
have
can't.
somebody held hostage. So he literally hit fired someone, and Zuma just like lost his mind like watching it. Like that just summed it up for me when I saw that. Like this gun, if it's not adjusted, this is a chance where I'm gonna agree with the GA committee that does or doesn't exist. Like things got to go if we can literally hit fire across the map with with this gun. So um, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of saying like this current meta could dictate the success or failures of ABC teams, because I do feel like it'll be a moot point in a couple weeks if we're just playing a game or watching the teams play a game without this gun even involved.
Yeah, the only thing is that who knows what meta or what patch they'd be playing on for those
Yep.
first, like the
Yeah.
pre-break matches, which could have an effect of who starts a winner's bracket for Major 1 and all that stuff. So,
It's funny you brought that up because Trem actually said that to me um, last night. So let me just look. The first matches for the CDL are December 5th,
mhm.
and let's do Black Ops. I know it's that week. Black Ops 7 Season 1 is December 4th.
Yeah, so they're
So
not playing on that.
in typical COD fashion, the update is dropping a day before the matches, so they are most likely playing on the launch patch and not season 1 for these initial matches. And then depending on whenever season 1 reloaded would have to be like
End of
early
January.
January, maybe end of January. Yeah, so maybe like after the holiday break there, but the timing could work out where that update happens right before they get back from the holiday break. So I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean they said that they're increasing aim assist strength um, ahead of the season 1 launch. How far ahead? Who knows? If
No,
that's
that's in
actually
this update today.
okay. So
That they posted the dev blog. They literally posted it at 2:01, and obviously we went live at 2,
okay,
so classic.
yeah,
But they have weapon balancing, aim assist update, spawn tuning, mini map range increase, zombies boss fight nerfs. Those are just like the bullet points in the tweet that they listed. So it is being addressed. And I saw Octane was the one that I saw a tweet just now while we were going live. He tweeted, choosing to buff the subs as opposed to nerf the ARs, I think could be a mistake for TTK going forward, but we'll see. I also think leaving aim assist as is ideal. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.
yeah. I think in theory it sounds good to buff, the weaker guns, so to speak, but like you mentioned and like he mentioned, it can be pretty quick. It could really speed up the game a lot more than they probably intend to when you do that. And I think we've seen over the years that the slower games are typically the better games. I mean, that's probably an old head take now, but I don't know if people really agree with it in general, but I personally believe that to be true. And I think if you polled most of the CDL, we're probably going to eliminate the under 20 crowd just to silence their opinions. But I think most people would probably say that generally the slower the better, because it actually increases the skill gap. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, like we're talking, and all of this literally could change over the weekend, and then all of this is kind of like a moot point, like you said. Other stuff we'll just run through real quickly before we get to the ROSTERMANIA portion and kind of clean up that kind of stuff. Major 3, we've talked about this before, but Major 3 was confirmed to be at DreamHack Atlanta on May 15th to the 17th. So that we have the entire CDL schedule right now, and I think that's awesome. We know basically the venues. We know like there's gonna be 2 DreamHack related events in Birmingham, England, and Atlanta, Georgia. We know where Champs is gonna be. Like, we know the dates of all this shit. Honestly, Daniel Say was kind of cooking this offseason. It took him a while to get things in order, and for him to release the stuff, which I'm always going to be a hater and a critic for, but at least when he came on stream or video with Miles and was talking about this stuff, he had pretty much everything locked down and could announce everything. Yeah, except this. Even though they announced, I think they announced that it was going to be in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, but they didn't announce when it was going to be, and they didn't say that it was DreamHack. So everything else, awesome. Your overall thoughts now that we actually have the full 2026 CDL schedule in the, kind of on paper, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this numerous times, like comparing it to real sports and being like, just imagine like inching closer to the season start of the NFL, and the NFL schedule is just not out yet. Like, that's just not a thing in real sports. So like, this is the best overall job that the CDL has done in terms of releasing all of the important information as quickly as possible. Previous years, it's always been holding on to the Champs announcement, which I get. That's the prestigious event. If you want to, just do like your majors and release that info and then save Champs to hype it up later on, I get that. But that does, in my opinion, make it harder for some of these other people who might be more casual fans if they want to go to Champs, and they got to plan months in advance. Like that could make it harder for some fans to attend. But yeah, like, you got to give them their flowers for this year. Like, definitely the best job in terms of getting all that important scheduling information out as soon as possible. Like we said, literally, this was out before the game even launched. So definitely been other seasons where that has not been true. So kudos to them.
We have 2 GOATs returning to competitive Call of Duty. The first of which, the French GOAT, not Gotaga, but Wailers, who has been a Valorant pro for the last few years, and he's making his return to Call of Duty. I don't know, like you said, he was my guy. I don't know how that got. I don't know how that got to be the case.
You mentioned it a couple times on the pod, so.
But yeah, he honestly, people, I mean, newer fans do not know who he is, like, for sure. But he was on Team Vitality. Was probably the most well known, because Vitality just in general was like the premier French team for a while. And then he was also on Overtime and Denial and Elevate. And the last one was Train Hard. That was like the last like well-known or decently well-known team he was on. So he's back. I looked on his COD Wiki page. He'll be 28 on like Monday. So happy birthday to Wailers.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know what it's going to be. I think I said he should be the Gentlemates sub, because that's kind of how this goes. I don't know what his kind of capacity is. I didn't follow him much in Valorant. I knew that he was a pro, obviously, exactly. But other than that, Overall thoughts on Wailers making his return to competitive COD?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and kind of like you said, looking at the COD Wiki page, he actually teamed with Gotaga um, many moons ago, and that just obviously brings up an interesting scenario where maybe he's dominating in challengers early on, and they bring him on if things aren't going well for Gentlemates. They have a French player again. Uh, some sort of connection there with the fan base could be an interesting option, whether it's as an actual player, maybe it's a thing where he comes on as a sub, like you said, or maybe it's, we're looking next off season at potential changes for Gentlemates. Maybe they bring him on as a coach or influencer or something. I don't really know, but just an interesting thing. He might have even played Counter Strike for some point after playing COD, but I knew
Yeah.
like you don't know too much about his success in Valorant and stuff, but I did know he was like one of the rare cases of a COD guy going over and becoming a pro in Valorant. So that was kind of cool. But now he's back, so we'll see how he does.
Fun fact: he played with both Hydra and Abusa. So
There you go.
that's I think that was rookie Hydra because that was before he came to America. And then the biggest news, obviously, Doug Censor Martin. He is back. He has risen. He is part of the Team War roster for this Monster Launch Invitational. He's playing with Standy, Johnny, and Johnny, and Diamond Con. What a weird team, just in general. I don't know how Doug keeps doing it. I've made my thoughts very well known about Doug over the years. He has not played competitive in like a year, right? He didn't play at all last season, I believe.
Did he play the year before that? I don't even remember at this point.
I don't know. He's been like a shadow GM for like 6 years now.
Last year he was like the actual GM, and I think the year before that was when, because that was MW3. So like he was like, that was the whole Slasher versus Snoopy thing, and they were trying to advocate for keeping him around, and that's when he was like, last year he was like legit GM, whether it was in name or not. The year before that was the whole shadow GM stuff. So I think it's been at least 2 years since he played in any capacity.
And according to Brian's stats on Twitter, this will be the first pro event or pro tournament or whatever what you want to call it since COD Champs 2018 that he has played. He teamed with rookie Dashy then, which would have been Enigma 6 probably. I think Dashy's...
He was on Cole.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. So, yeah, complexity, not like the legendary real... It was like the gross logo complexity, I think, which they're back to, or they're back to the old one, I think. I'm fairly sure. Yeah, so that shows like how long it's been. Obviously, this is full of ex-pros. Standy, probably most notably for Minnesota. Johnny has gotten a few shots at LAG, I believe, this past season. Diamond Con has been floating around for a while. I'm interested to see what happens with 3 of these guys. I don't think that there's really a future. I just don't think Doug has that kind of motion. Like I don't think that the other pros are going to be like, yeah, let's give Doug a shot.
I saw there was something too with I think Fellow for challengers is trying to team with Eric Boom, who we've talked about previously for his association with Miami Heretics. And I think there's some stuff going on with like getting some of these European players over to the US. So I think that's probably more likely the case here with Team War, is they just needed like a last minute fill in for whoever they actually want to play with and challengers this season, and Censor is like, yeah, get me in there. Because I went to Censor's Twitter and he hasn't even tweeted anything about it. So that's makes me feel like this is definitely more of just like a, last minute sub situation.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I was looking on Diamond Con's Twitter, and basically it's a team of 3: Johnny, Diamond Con, and Standy is alone by Omit, and they're going under Next Threat. This is a weird. There's a lot of stuff that we're learning here.
Next threat is Censor.
Yeah, maybe Censor's bankrolling the team. I mean, he's
that was
definitely got the money.
that's a deep cut because that Quantic next threat was the team that Censor
Won nationals with.
won nationals with in Black Ops 1. And then when he tried to come back, they like did a rebrand, and I think that was in World War II as well, so 2018. And he was playing with like Nagafin. I can't even remember who else was. Maybe Ricky. I can't even remember, but that was a while ago. So I don't even know. But obviously, Doug is associated with Boston Breach now, so I don't know how all that would work out and whatnot. But yeah, interesting situation to say the least. Who does the bracket have War playing first? Let's see. Playing Toronto, so that's interesting. It would have been funny if Doug was playing someone like Thieves and Scrap just as like talking shit about Censor, who hasn't played comp in years. Would have been great.
Well, I mean, depending on how this bracket works, if both of them lose in the first round, they could play losers round 1, which would be hilarious, and I would be very seated for that match. But yeah, I think we should probably move on to the RosterMania stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to bring it up because I saw TACRAB did a video on Big Wake Awakening potentially being banned mid-match, sort of similar to the Jimbo situation from a couple years ago now. I've also been looking on Twitter. I haven't seen him say anything, and I saw, I think, Yuli, who's one of his teammates or was playing with him at the time, like tweeted like, he didn't do anything wrong, just get me out. So, TACRAB in his video was, playing it safe and saying, properly wording in the sense of we don't know what's going on here. There have been instances where it's been flagged before where a player's come up and then it's like a false hit or whatever. So we don't know what the situation is with Wake, but that's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on. And I did TechCrab brought up in his video, and I know we've talked about it on the pod before. It is kind of weird that this is potentially coming up all these years after. I just remember Crim6 was so vocal about Wake being a cheater when he first came into the CDL, and we were all like, it's just the new kid on the block is absolutely frying off the rip, and Crim's the old guy yelling at the clouds and whatnot. But I don't know, maybe Crim knew what he was talking about. We'll have to see what the situation is as it unfolds, but I definitely thought that was at least worth bringing up.
Yeah, we need Slack to come back on and talk about Mac.
Slack
because,
too, yeah.
I mean, honestly, we could probably dig up all of those tweets, like Arstes, Pristini, like the whole team, and IW. I mean, like, there's so many of them that, I mean, we had to fact check all of them now because.
Yeah. I remember there's the clip of Slack, and he says like, I'd rip the mullet off that kid's head or something for Mac, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure he didn't even have a mullet at the time.
I don't think so either.
Just the way he said it was so funny. I'll never forget that.
But yeah, RosterMania, a lot of stuff got confirmed over the past week, none of which was like really like surprising information. I think the first stuff was November 6th. The Vancouver Surge, they officially announced Gwyn, Abe, Lunars, and Legend as their team. And then Ricky Atura also was announced as their head coach. So I'm interested just to see what this team is. Obviously, we really haven't got to see a ton with Abe at this level. Certainly not anything from Legend in COD, but a very talented Halo player. I don't know if this is going to be a long-term thing for him or if he plans on going back to Halo after this season. But the talent would be here. Like Legend, I think he's a world champion in Halo. Gwyn is one of the best young players in the CDL. Abe was obviously highly thought of within Toronto, which has a really, really strong track record of identifying young talent. And Lunars was probably one of the most anticipated rookies of last season, albeit it didn't really work out with him in LAG, but nothing really worked out with LAG last year, so I don't know how much of that can be placed on him. Just overall thoughts on this roster, especially with Atura coming in as head coach.
Yeah, I think, you know, you talk about Gwynn being a young player. He's like the de facto veteran
Yeah.
on the squad. We've kind of talked about that over the last couple months, so that's an interesting way of looking at this, like how he's able to elevate his game to the next level with these other young guns around him. There was an unfortunate clip that was making the rounds earlier this week of Legend playing in some tournament or online wager, and he kind of got turned on and just destroyed. And then Gwyn, it was from Gwyn's perspective. You just see like Gwyn's eyebrows raised, and he doesn't say a word, so that was kind of funny. Um, but I think that's overall my feelings on this team are that I think the ceiling is higher than what we're going to get early on. Like it's just, fact of the matter, you got a guy like Legend coming over with not much COD experience. I do expect there to be growing pains early on. And I forget, well, I think, well, the last time we talked about this, I compared it to the opposite of what Carolina did last season, where everyone was expecting Carolina to be uh, not a great team, and then early on they got off to a hot start, and then they kind of slowed down after that. I could see this Surge team struggling early on, just as they, adjust to the game and whatnot, and then as Legend and the boys get more reps and whatnot, I could see them getting better and improving and being more of a middle of the pack team, and as opposed to what I'm anticipating is a rough start for them. So could be wrong, but that's my general outlook on what this team could potentially do. I did think it was interesting too. Gwyn and Lunars seem to have a I don't know if it's like a friendship or just past teammates or whatever, but it seemed like the way they were talking in the announcement video was that they wanted to play together and they had before. So I did find that interesting. We'll see how it all works out.
I think it's also worth mentioning that, like or I should just rephrase it. The fact that Frosty and Atura work together, I just think is like
Yep.
that you hope that that's what happens with Legend. Well, obviously, you want better if necessary, but Frosty had a really good rookie season with Florida back in 2020. Atura was his coach. I mean, maybe that works out, maybe it doesn't, but I think that there's at least some solid thinking there that he was able to do it then. And Florida was actually a pretty good team that season, and I think they showed a lot of talent. This is a different scenario, though. Like you said, Gwyn is like the vet, and we saw with Minnesota last year that that could backfire, and it might not work out the way you want it. But we'll see. This is like a team that, like you said, they probably should stick with them for a little bit, like for the at least the first through the first major, hopefully at least.
You can't.
I think,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
If they make a change, this would be like Vegas Falcons last year when
Yeah.
it was the all Saudi team, and it's like you play 2 matches and get stomped, and then people are crying for it. Like it's
Yeah.
like there's got to be some leeway here, and if you're investing in this kid Legend and willing to give him a starting CDL spot right off the rip, you can't be like, oh, we're 0-5 after our first 5 matches. He's got to go. Like you're making this decision and not gonna bail on it super early. If you do, then we're gonna have to we'll be having a much deeper conversation about that later on.
Yeah. The only reason I say that is they play LAG first, then they play Toronto, they play Cloud9, so hopefully they would get one of those wins there. They play Boston, who we'll talk about in like just a minute. They play Optic, Miami, and Vegas at FaZe. So like they realistically could have one win in their first set of qualifiers. I think you could probably say that they might beat Boston. I don't know if that's really a guarantee because it's basically like they're the opposite of each other. Like you look at Vancouver, none of these guys have really played together. They're all super young, don't have a ton of experience in the CDL. Boston is they've basically all been together. Like the trio have been together for years now. They seem to have the chemistry, so I could really see them going and winning one match in the qualifiers. But like you said, it shouldn't matter. They should go through at least I think at least Major 2, just to see what's going on. If they're like 2-10 or whatever it is at the end of Major 2, maybe you say, okay, like we have to make a change here, and we try to identify that. But yeah, I think the best course of action is just kind of let it ride out, see what can happen, see if anything kind of improves or the chemistry kind of comes together over those first 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, Gwinternet has been a thing historically. Maybe just Gwyn's online is able to carry these squad to a couple more wins than people expect. Who knows?
And Major 2 is the full round robin,
Yep.
right? So, I mean, if he's who we say he is, even though I think he's very good on land as well,
Yes.
I mean, that works in their favor. Like to have 11 matches online heading into Major 2 before you go over to Europe, sounds good to me. November 10th, Slasher, Nero, Craze, and Lurks were confirmed as the Carolina Royal Ravens roster. We talked about this a few weeks ago. We have no idea how Craze and Lurks are going to work in the CDL, but I appreciate the swing that Carolina is taking. Nero also managing to get onto a roster. I was really worried for him, but I think he's a good enough player to be in the CDL. We'll see what happens with Slasher. I mean, you say he looked really good in the tournaments. I'm sick and I'm talking so much now, but I don't foresee this team being super competitive, but it could be like last year, and they turn out to be like a top 6 team at least through a portion of the season. What do you think of Carolina?
So I will say the initial, I don't think concern is necessarily the right word, but just my initial assessment of this squad, really, especially going back to when we first talked about it, was like the report was it was going to first be Geo on this team instead of Nero. And with how the meta has shaped up early on, having Geo on this team in an AR heavy meta would have probably been a little bit better. And especially the way that for the flank tournament, with assuming the duos were just based on the the AR SMG pairings, like we were saying, it was Slasher and Nero paired together, and I feel like if Nero is the flex in an AR meta, that just doesn't really like go well in my mind, because I just think of Nero as that super uber aggressive SMG entry player who's he's going to have streaks where he goes 0-5, and he's also going to have streaks where he's just ripping two pieces every life, just frying people, making the plays to break the hard point and whatnot. So, I am a little concerned for this squad in terms of how the initial AR dominant meta could impact them, especially if Nero is just the second AR. But again, I'm not going to put too much stock into that right now, because who knows if the meta stays the way it's been going forward.
And the underrated part is that they're remote this year, which is something that Brian Saint revealed a little over a week ago now. Which, I guess it depends on like where they go, because they've been in Charlotte, and I mean Slasher's from California. I don't know if he's going back home. If he is, rest in peace to this team online. That's just not a good fit. Like if they all go to Texas, but they're not being like paid to go, I don't know what the deal is there. But I mean that really could be kind of a killer for them early part of the season, like we saw with Cloud9 last year. So I guess we'll see. I don't know. We'll definitely hear about it in the first few weeks of the season if they're all like in different parts of the country, because it's going to be a really rough time for them if that's the case. And the other teams will complain about it too, most likely. Boston Breach, November 12th. They announced that their roster's coming back minus Awakening, who, I mean, sounds like they got out of the Awakening business maybe right when they should. And they bring in Nasty. I think this is a good team. I think they have about the same ceiling as they had last year, which is if they make it to champs, they did it. Like, that's all that really matters in the end. They're never going to compete for championships, even though they were dangerously close at the end of last season. But I, you know, I have a lot of respect for this roster. I love that they're just sticking together. That the Snoopy, Purge, and Cammy have been together for like 2 years now, and that chemistry can't be overstated. And I think it helps them in some of those matches, especially because they just pull off those random upsets from time to time. And I tend to think that's the reason why is they know each other very, very well, maybe even better than the much more talented teams that they go up against. So, what do you think about Boston kind of rolling it back minus Awakening for Nasty?
Yeah, I think, not going to sit here and pretend like I think Boston's going to compete for championships on day one, but it is, Nasty was a part of that Surge team last year that had all those second place finishes. And it's kind of just like, in my eyes, I'm looking at this as how does Nasty build on that? Like
Yeah.
his stock, although he didn't capture any championships, like his stock seemingly couldn't be higher after a season like that. And he gets an opportunity now to try and replicate that with a different cast of players surrounding him. And he's able to showcase whether that was, you know, a product of the team environment he was on last year, or if really he can be, uh, one of these guys who's just a plug and play piece and on a team that can contend for titles. That's fair to say, even though they didn't actually capture any. So, I think especially, uh, again, trying not to put too much stock into it, but a game like this with an AR, like I feel like this type of, it's weird to say it because it seems like it's just a do-it-all gun right now, but like a type of that, the kind of player I think of Nasty as is like an AR player who is doing some SMG like things. Like he feels like he can really be a true flex, even if it's mostly using an AR. So I don't know if that made any sense to people listening, but that's just the way I just go back to last year when really. For me, it felt like with Neptune joining Surge, like, yeah, Neptune was frying off the rip, but it just felt like he unlocked something in Abuza and Nasty in particular that really elevated that squad as a whole. And maybe playing with somebody like Snoopy is the key. Like, Snoopy and Neptune both being aggressive SMG players like that. Maybe he's just a plug and play here where he's able to carry that success from Surge. So I don't know what to expect really from this Boston squad, but I do. My eyes definitely are on Nasty here to see what he's able to do after the season he had last year.
And then Cloud9 and Miami both announced their rosters on the same day, November 13th, last Thursday. C9, we already heard about it. Afro Beans, Vivid, and Mac. Miami, Rancor, Super, Trakes, and Metals. I mean, we've talked about the C9 one. Like, I don't think either of us are very high on this roster. They're kind of in the same boat, I think, as Boston, in that if they make it to champs, I think that's a good deal. I think that's really what you're hoping for. I don't know if you can really expect much more than that. Miami is completely different. So let's just talk about C9 real quick.
Yep.
Do you agree with me on that? That like there seems to be like a pretty clear ceiling for this team, and it would be like sixth-ish, like somewhere where they're not competing for championships, so to speak. But the hope is to at least make it to champs, make it into the winners bracket of these majors.
Yeah, I think I said this the last time we talked about this roster. They are my pick to be this year's Carolina in
Mm,
the sense that I do not have high expectations for this team, but I have a feeling that they could be a team that's like sneaky good at the start of this launch because it's not like it's a young squad here. These guys have all been around the block, and I feel like there's just something about this squad. It's got me thinking like they could be like a sneaky team to get a high seed at this major one, and then they sort of like, you know, other teams start to catch up and they start to fall behind, and that's when they have to consider making a roster change or not, something like that. So that's kind of how I'm viewing this squad. I do think, you brought it up kind of just, when we were going over the online portion here, like just I don't know what the C9 living situation is, but that could throw a major wrench in that Carolina metaphor there. If these guys are playing from California again, they have a good chance of really struggling if the server issues persist. So yeah, I think overall, I don't have super high expectations. I'm really happy Afro's back in the CDL. I think it's awesome. Vivid and Mac are getting another opportunity. I mean, same with Beans. Like those three guys are really all on the same boat in terms of just being like fringe guys who obviously Beans' situation with the whole visa stuff and Mercury's last year is a little different than Vivid and Mac, but they're guys who have been around the block and been sort of cast away by some teams, and now they're getting a chance at redemption, showing what they're capable of. So, yeah, just don't have super high expectations for the squad, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're sneaky good at the start of the season.
And then Miami, so Metals, Super, Rincor, and Trakes. No idea about Trakes. He is the wild
Yep.
card in this team.
Yep.
The other three, though, that's a good team. And the AR heavy meta, have Rincor and Super, I think
Yeah.
that's honestly one of the better AR duos in the league. I think they're gonna be really good. It's just if Trakes is who they think he is, and like to put him on this roster with how great of a season they had last year, they have to think that he's really, really good. If he's that good, this team's gonna be really good and gonna be really hard to beat. Even the best teams in the league that we saw that last year, both LAT and FaZe really struggled with Miami at different points in the season. Miami, they never made it to a grand final, I don't think, but they were very, very close. I think they actually could make it to a grand final or a few this season. They could be the Vancouver of last year, and I don't think that's an incredible result for Miami. But yeah, I think the major question mark is Trakes. If he is kind of as good as they need him to be to replace Real, who was awesome for them.
Yeah, and we'll obviously have to do like our preseason power rankings and awards and all that stuff, but that was one thing I was surprised about with Miami was I saw like the flank power rankings, and I think maybe Breaking Point Dope Check did power rankings. It felt like to me that a lot of those they were just immediately throwing Miami into like a top like a 3 to 6 range team like right off the rip.
Mm-hmm.
And that just to me, I mean, maybe all those guys know more about Trakes than us, obviously, but it feels like it's really hard for me to evaluate Miami that highly without knowing what Trace can be, because it's not like he's coming in and replacing the worst player on a good team. He has to come in and fill the shoes of Real, who was an integral part of this team for several seasons. And obviously Rencor won Rookie of the Year last year. Super completely just made this team an S&D juggernaut when he came in. But Real was that first, like when he joined 2 years ago now, that really got the ball rolling on this whole like turning things around for Miami as a franchise. So it's really big shoes for Trakes to fill. I do think it's worth like you said, like if we're in an AR favored meta, Super and Rencor immediately become a very scary AR duo for a lot of other teams to try and contend with. So they have that going well for them. But it's just hard for me to really uh, get a good grasp for my expectations for this Miami team without seeing Trakes in action. Um, I will say that regardless of what Trakes has done, based on what we saw last year from Miami, I am immediately expecting them to be a really good S&D team again. And if their S&D takes a hit in any form in this game, regardless of the reason, that could be a big factor in any success or lack thereof for Miami this year.
Yeah, I think with Miami, it's the biggest thing is there's so many competitive teams, so many really good teams, at least on paper, heading into this season. So phase is like a big variable. You have no idea what they're actually going to be like because we've never seen Simp play without a BZ, play without Cell for many years. Really, just and obviously like Abuza and 04 as pros, they've only been in Vancouver. So like to put them together is not an odd fit, but like you just don't know what it's going to actually turn out to be. Falcons, I mean, I've said it before, but like there's a pretty obvious question mark on that team that if he isn't up to snuff, then that team can not fall apart, but definitely kind of underachieve based on the other three's talent level. Toronto, we talked about, it's the meta. Like the meta will dictate, in my opinion, how Toronto kind of navigates through this season. And Insight is also a big part of that. If Insight is as bad as he was, I think, at Champs, it's just not going to work out for that team. Kleenex's role also is a big variable on that team. I think Miami just has fewer variables, fewer question marks heading into the season, but Trakes is such a massive question mark, obviously, that I think there's good reason for you to be skeptical about, like, I'm not going to put them up near the top. But I could also make the argument that, like, heading into the season, they're like a 4th or 5th place team off the rip, just because all these other teams kind of have to fit these pieces. I didn't even mention LAT, which I'm not as very high, I'm not as high on, but like those teams, they have a lot of question marks, or they also have question marks, and that turns into kind of being a believer in the Miami just because they're bringing back 3/4 of the team rather than half of it or just like one person, and they're trying to fit together all these pieces. So I think it's gonna be really interesting. They were a fascinating team last year, especially once they brought in Super. If they're able to kind of pick up where they left off, like that makes the league so much more intriguing, because then you have really half of the league that legitimately could win a tournament every time that you play. And I hope that is the case. We will see. Of course, like we mentioned at the top of the show, Gentlemates is the only team that has not confirmed their roster yet. We don't even know if they're a team. We don't know if, the roster, we don't know the logo, we don't know the team name. Hopefully we find that out this weekend. I have my doubts about that. But if not, we will be seeing Orglis play in the Monster Launch Invitation Tournament. Anything else before we get out of here?
You missed Minnesota there, but Minnesota confirmed Estriel, Mamba, Skies, and Kremp. We've talked about that roster a couple times now. It's a big question mark there with Skies.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. He's getting another shot, and I think highly of Estriel, and I do think we talked about the Omit guys from last year all getting a shot. This could be a team if I could see where these guys are just a sneaky good squad again, but I was fooled by Minnesota last year. I don't really know. I like Estriel, and I do think in a meta where you got multiple, I feel like we've seen Estriel be a little bit more of a flex in some of these games, especially 2 years ago in his rookie year. He was kind of, that LAG squad he was on was kind of just trying to do multiple things with the same set of players. So they were switching things up a bunch, it felt like to me from the outside looking in. But I don't have high expectations for this team as is, but maybe they could surprise some people. I don't know. Will be interesting to see how Mamba does getting his shot in the CDL, though.
I should also mention, so this is at least according to COD Wiki, so this might not be entirely updated, but I think it's just worth mentioning because we did mention Team War's roster, but Bush Gaming, Telluride Bush Gaming, their roster is Capsidal, Spart, Proloot, and TJ. Temp is their coach, which I love Donnie. So this is a really fun team. And Stallion's roster is Encourage, who I believe retired last year and then is back.
That's weird.
Symbols, Derek, and Swooty. So none of these guys have ever been in the CDL, which is kind of like par for the course for the Stallion stuff. And COD doesn't have the Omit Brooklyn roster on their website. It says that Brack is a part of the roster, like once you actually click onto the page. But I don't know how accurate that is, or if that was just like a holdover from last year. We'll see what happens. But the reason I bring it up is because some of these guys are definitely going to be looked at this weekend, even if it is just online and people say, "Oh, it doesn't really matter." Like if Encourage just pops off in the Monster Invitational, that's going to matter. Like that's definitely, especially considering they play Optic first round. If those guys have like a really good showing round one against the defending world champions, yeah, people are going to take notice of that, even if it doesn't directly lead to like a roster spot in the CDL. And the same goes for Bush Gaming, War, and Omit Brooklyn. War plays Toronto, like we said. Bush plays LAT, who, you know, like who knows how that roster is going to fit together before the season even starts. And then Omit Brooklyn plays Vancouver. And you just talked about it a little bit ago. Like, those guys are all playing with each other for the first time. Some of those guys, like Legend, has never played competitive Call of Duty certainly at this level before. So, you know, some of these things could matter. And, you know, we saw it a few years ago with that LAG Academy team. Like, they went to the Pro-Am, and 3/4 of them, I think Diamond Con was the only one that didn't get picked up. But that's a good opportunity for a lot of those guys to either get into the CDL for the first time or get back into the CDL after some time away. Anything else before we get out of here?
I think that should be it.
All right. So obviously 2 weeks from now, from the time you're listening to this, the CDL season will begin. The plan is, Bink and I really haven't talked about this, but I think both of us think that we're going to go back to regular shows. Last year, we were doing 2 shows a week. I think that we can pretty much continue that. I think our schedule last year was certainly Sunday nights. We did our shows like post match shows.
Yep.
And then I think we did it on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember exactly.
So, yeah, something like that.
I think that's probably what we're going to continue to do. We're obviously going to do a big preview show. I think we'll probably start the 2 show a week thing, like the week going into the CDL. So like we'll have a Sunday show and then a show where we'll do our predictions and all that before December 5th. And then we'll just kind of keep it rolling. Obviously the break is not ideal, and we really were running on fumes at the end of the break last season, but we'll try to come up with some fun stuff. But I think that's kind of the way we're going, but we'll let you know as we do that. Please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. Give a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at JBank with 2 Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast tours at Ego Chall Podcast. I'm not exactly sure when the next show will be, but will not be as long as the last or this most recent break, because that would be kind of insane. But once we start doing shows, we probably will just keep doing shows for the next 6 or 7 months, God willing. And I think that about does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep, short and sweet from me. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support. We finally have 11 out of 12 CDL rosters confirmed. The game is here. And with this, you know, monster tournament coming up this weekend, the action is really just about to get underway. So, yeah, hopefully we figure out a schedule and you guys are able to tune in as we produce more regular content because, yeah, like Preston said, just off season's harder when there isn't a ton of stuff going on at different times and it's all, you know, random. So just got to roll with the punches, but yeah, should be able to get back in the groove of things a little bit here. And, you know, like we said earlier, game's only been out a week, but it seems like we're in for a pretty exciting season, hopefully. So hope you guys will join us on our journey for probably our 5th season now of the podcast, something like that. Whatever it is, though, been a blast, and hope you guys will tune in and join us for the ride. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you guys as always, and remember to send the chow.